morning. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. We'll sample your feedback in the course of this broadcast, and we welcome them here on Daybreak. Gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, let's now focus on the value system in Kenya. And I first come to you, Wanjohi, here. I mean, do we have a bank of national values as a country that informs the very fabric of the Kenyan society?
We do, and even our constitution guides us on this. But and the question is not whether we have them or we don't have them. I think the question is how we apply them. I feel these have been eroded massively when you look at the family unit, when you look at our religious institutions. I'm a Christian, so I'm going to speak about the churches, for instance. And we have nothing that is holding us. I think greed has taken over a lot. And I say greed because recently a county called Nyandarua, an elected leader, took 10 million to the church. Mm-hmm. Just this week, or about 2 days ago, we saw them demonstrating because of poor roads. So this particular elected leader was able to persuade, he said that he borrowed the money, or he got the money from the president to give him 10 million to take to the church, but he's not able to persuade the same government to come and repair the roads for his people. Then when you go to the church that is accepting this token of 10 million, it doesn't pause to ask, where did this money come from, and why are we having this kind of money being distributed? So I feel, and I really, really worry that the institutions that ought to lead the way and show us the way in terms of values are also leading in terms of the stomach. They want to prioritize their personal interest as opposed to the common good. I grew up in a small village at the foot of Mount Kenya called Kafaru, and anybody who is old enough to be your mother or your father or your grandparent was in a position to discipline you, for instance. Today, that is no longer there. That role, that aspect of community, raising children, taking care of our morals and the things that we stand for is being eroded. We also lack role models. Who are our role models? The people who stand on podiums and insult and use very, very bad words. Those ones who are telling us to go and drill our wells when we cry over the high cost of living and we say the cost of petrol is quite high. We lack role models and people we can look up to and say you desire to be like them. Before the break, you said 70% of Kenyans are paying bribes to get government services. We desire to become politicians so that you can become wealthy. In other countries, the people who are wealthiest are those who are in manufacturing. But here, when you work in government, when you become a politician, you become wealthy. You know, there is a disconnect there because we look up to our leaders. We want to be like our leaders, and these leaders do not inspire any more moral values. So I feel there is moral decay, and it is continuously eroding. The values are continuously eroding, and we need to be very mindful. The church, for instance, needs to take its place in terms of inspiring the next generation on how to be morally upright.
Okay. Angel, what then might be the contributory factors of Wanjohi's account of the eroded values in the Kenyan context?
Yes, I think we can have a lot of values put on paper, but how we exactly know what we are made of is through our actions. The fruits of our labor will show exactly where we lean on. There is a lot of doublespeak, and as we've talked about, and promises are being made but not being kept. And for example, when you look at the Building Bridges initiative that we had last year, had a lot of promises for women, youth, and so on and so forth. And we had politicians saying that it was not good for the country, the country was not ready for it. But what do they do when they get into government? That is the first thing they want to promote. We spent a lot of money, taxpayers' money, to push that initiative, but then now we are going back to those pockets to facilitate and fund similar initiatives, just with different names. I mean, when you look at our country and the political party space, you're seeing a lot of dishonesty, because what did Kenyans fight for in the 90s? It was for multi-party democracy. But what we are seeing with this government is that if you do not speak their language, then you are not Kenyan. You do not have a right to access any service in Kenya. You do not have a right to speak on what your issues are in Kenya. What we're seeing with the Jubilee Party is totally lack of values. I mean, when you have a political party that is trying to be gagged by a head of state, is something that we should not condone as a country. When you see people in political spaces trying to be more exclusive than inclusive, then you beg the question, what is politics all about? When we are talking about distribution of resources and we are having regions receiving less resources than others, but they are still Kenyans and still pay the same taxes, begs the biggest question. When we see women campaigning and supporting a political party for president, for the presidential, for government, then you do not see them appointed or put in significant offices. Then you ask the question, I mean, what is our country about? When you talk about 2/3 gender rule, it's implementation. We had the former AG make an attempt to address that, talking about reducing constituencies and ensuring that at least we have an avenue of electing one male MP, one female MP. Maybe that's just the way to go, because implementing the 2/3 gender rule has become a roller coaster.
Okay, Mundalo, how did we get here? Because there seems to be a painting of a picture that's so grim when it comes to reflecting on ourselves as a society.
Ayub, first of all, I would just want to say that when you give an example that my sister Angel puts of political parties and the president interfering with matters of the Jubilee Party, I sit on the National Executive Committee of the party, and political parties in Kenya are run by the neck. We are creating a wrong culture in this country where there is every problem, it is associated and the president has to be demonized for it. Soon we'll be blaming the president for marital challenges. Just because you do not agree with your wife, you say it's the president who has come in. The president would not have an interest in Jubilee Party. The president won the election without the Jubilee Party. So I think that would be part of the moral decay, where we are being dishonest and we just don't want to call our problems for what they are. But now, to your question, and first of all, there is a lot of painting that we are a very bad society by the first two speakers that have come before me. But I don't think the situation is as bad as it sounds. We actually have more good people in this country than bad people. But we have several problems. First of all, the people who champion the right things are less vocal than those who champion the wrong things. Because we are looking at a pool of, for instance, in government, and government has a lot of people. But when one or two people are able to put out statements that would be hurting to the republic, we unfortunately are able to use them to judge the entire government. And look at, because most of the people who are doing the right thing, rarely are they actually speaking out. You look at the youth fraternity, for instance, the docket with which I represent and all my colleagues here. You will see that we have a lot of young people who are doing the right thing in this country. We have a lot of young people who are in innovation. We have a lot of young people who want to see this country heading the right direction. But the problem is, how vocal are they? They are more silent than the other ones who are willing to shout on top of wherever about how they are able to move the country in the wrong direction. So in as much as I agree that there is actually a moral decay, there is a problem generally, but I don't agree that it's as bad as sometimes it's made to sound. I tend to think that sometimes it is because, it is just because those people who are doing the right thing are not speaking as much as they need to. And two, we are having the problem of, in society today, you are respected not for your values, not for what you stand for, but for what you have. We grew up, Ayub, and we saw teachers as they were very respectable people, and were able to be punished, as my sister said, by anyone who was your elder, was able to punish you and guide you to the right path. But today, we have formed a society whereby our respect to you is determined by what you have. How much do you have? It's mostly about the money and the material around it. So it then begs the question, who will then the young people look up to? The young people are now looking up to people who are not necessarily role models. They're just people maybe on social media because they can be able to post a different car every day. And therefore the young people are able to look up to them. And then we have the right person who is doing the right thing, like my brother Isaac here, but Isaac is silent. He's not speaking to those young people.
Okay.
And therefore, these young people are then, they have no option than to follow the guide of, unfortunately, the person who is missing.
All right, Lydia.
It's also about the voices we are able to put out.
Okay, well, Wanjohi, I'll come to you because I'm sure you have fundamental disagreements.
Yes, I do.
Okay, Wabuge, then talk to me about when the vast majority of the people who do the right things, for example, we aren't here to demonize or to use the broad brush to paint government in one aspect. I mean, they are government officials who serve with distinction and determination. Yeah. But it's the few who at times with executive arrogance, for example, when Gachagua says Kenya is a shareholding company, where the problem lies, and when Moses Kuria tells Kenyans to go and dig their own oil wells. Then Wabuga, when will the vast majority who are doing the right things speak about these issues that are eating into the moral fabric of the Kenyan society?
I think when we talk about, the entire concept of values and, what the trickle-down effect, I think what comes into my mind greatly is, they say that more precious than our children are our children's children. And if at all we are trying to raise a community or a nation that is hinged on values that can be passed from one generation to another, then we need to ask ourselves, where did the rain start beating us? We need to question our leadership. We need to question the things that have come to the fore to an extent that right now we don't believe that whatever we are passing to the next generation is is something that will stand the test of time. And that's why when we are talking about the political angle in Kenya, or rather let's just a quick focus on Kenya and its peers in East Africa. When you look at our political setup, our politics is based on tribe. Until you wipe up or mop up our tribal card, it becomes hard for you to have an authority in Kenyan politics. Look at our neighbors, Tanzania. Tanzania have established themselves into parties. When you belong to a certain party, then their parties have grown into an ideology based. And that's why they don't have the kind of changes that we do experience every day. Let's not talk about Uganda because we cannot adequately describe the concept around it. But then, when we talk about the tribal angle in Kenya, and this is what is bringing to the fore issues like shareholding, it will be quite unfortunate that of the youth that we are sitting here, any of us will rise into a political angle, again on a tribal-based angle, then we will be losing it. Because when we are looking further to where we are going, that's why I said more precious than our children and our children's children. Let's question ourselves, what was the value fragment of this country when we got independence? Where are we right now? When we are fighting for multi-party democracy in this country, and you go back to history books, you realize that there were men and women who rose on the basis of fighting for their country, who rose and placed a patriotic card ahead. That's why we will see a Nyang from one side, the likes of James Orengo, the likes of Paul Mwite, the likes of Martin Shikuku from Western. All these people had a strong leadership based on an ideology, based on something that was greater than themselves. But now when you come to a point where we are right now, where you see for us to get power, we need to go back to and balkanize our tribal blocks to bring this on table. Then it realizes that then we are lacking values, leadership values in this country, because we realize that of those small communities, when will they have a voice on that table? And then it comes onto a challenge of the emerging leaders who are here today. We see, we have already seen a little fireworks between Angel and Advance here, from one party holding the same position, but now in different factions. You see, that is where all the crisis starts. Until our political parties are formed on ideology and accept that we lost an election, we need to play our role in the opposition with the dignity and the courage that needs to be, because we went there, we weren't successful, but there is confidence that Kenyans placed upon us that to check this government, then it becomes something else. All right. But if at all, our political parties have become a ground whereby it's more of a poaching game. It's more of a poaching game for us to weaken the opposition. How well can we then bring in other political parties without respecting the ideals of the constitution, without respecting the political. That's why we set up the office of the political parties, so that discipline can be brought in. But unfortunately, that we have lost it. Everything said and done, we still have a chance. I do believe there is a remnant, and the remnant might be on this panel today. As we go forth, as we engage, some of us went
for the election. Yeah.
We campaign, and I couldn't agree more with my sister here when she talks about the challenges that we are facing even from the churches. It is unfortunate that the church compromised too much. Right now, Abdul Kadir, whom can you call out and say, this one is a Dr. David Gitari of our times? Who can we point out and say, this is a man who will stand on the principles of Bishop Alexander Muge and question out the government of the day? We have realized we have come to a position whereby the pulpit has been messed up, has been compromised.
All right.
And we need to go back and engage the church and tell the church, you know what? You are enjoying what you're enjoying because there are people who paid
the price.
A price.
Okay.
Like Alexander Muge.
Okay.
There are people who paid it with their voice and stood up and are to be remembered like Dr. Gitari of those times. Can we also challenge the next generation of clergy who will come up?
All right.
That we also raise strong clergy who will stand on the truth, who will use the pulpit not as a political bargaining tool for offering, but to speak reality to the government.
Okay, and also to Reverend Dr. Timothy Njoya, who was beaten by KANU operatives and left for dead, but apparently he wasn't and still is alive. Mohammed, because the language of the political players seems not to imbue discipline and the needed value etiquette in the Kenyan society. And we'll come to the social aspect of the material, the marriage question at the household level. But then is religion the place to run for solace? Is it the soft landing spot for the crisis we are facing as a country?
I would say no. One, because whereas it might be a good place to run, one, there is no cross-cutting religion in this country. We're a multitude of society and those values could differ, whereas where maybe on a lot of those values that we all aspire, they might be similar, but the approach to those values could be very different. So I wouldn't say that we run back to religion. I would say we run back to something that cuts across the country, probably the Constitution. However, my colleague here is really in love with the past and thinks that we were a good country at independence, that we fought for things which were good and we had national values and people aspired for those national values. I choose to disagree. So we'll take and start from the Kenyatta regime. What was it known for? Immediately after independence, the Mau Maus were never compensated. That was a stem of injustice, and political detainees started, the Kisumu massacre. So we've never really had, from the onset, we come to the Moi regime, similar, no social justice, inequitable division of revenue. The country was not developed at the same level. Those are national values. Patriotism. Have we ever had a government or at least a regime that we feel was patriotic to the country? No. Have we ever had a regime that is based on ideology, as my colleague would prefer? Absolutely not. He is very much against political bases on tribes and whatnot. But that has been the case since independence. Before independence, we had KANU and KADU. KADU made of the major tribes of this country, and KADU made of the smaller and marginalized communities. So we've always been a country that is divided by the political elites for their political gain, and that has always been the case. Why did we have the political violence of 2007? It was because those in power felt that they could force their way to continue being in power. When it comes to the Uhuru regime, similar problems continued. So I don't think we've ever been a country that is based on those national values which we aspire to two, which are of national unity, of social justice, of equitable distribution of revenue, the foundation must be good for I and a lot of other Kenyans to be patriotic to the country, for the country to be united. It is not just calling out for unity, it is doing things which call out for unity, which is equitable distribution of revenue, of resources, social justice, and all of these things.
Okay, Ibrahim, as a player who had interest in the top seat for Nakuru County, and it's one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the country when it comes to our ethnic belongings. I mean, what was your experience, and do you think that we have a value system that speaks to national unity, patriotism, and one that informs the unity that this country needs to the length of prosperity?
Let me respond to that in this manner, Ayub. The problem we are talking about here is not a problem limited to the political class. We have this problem in our politics, and unfortunately, we are having the same problem even in our churches. Very unfortunate. The place where we are supposed to run to find solutions for such issues is the problem that we are having, the problem magnified. But be as it may, let's get to the epicenter of the problem. What is the cause of this problem? In my opinion, how are we raising our children? What is the demonstration of parents to the children they are raising? Because these are the next generation, and whatever the behavior of the parents is definitely instilled in their children. We have a photocopy of parents in the children. Now, in the next 20, 30 years, what will our society look like? What behaviors are we inculcating in our children? Now, that is the big question. Now, however, we cannot keep complaining and about what our parents are inculcating in their children, because there comes an age, Ayub, when you don't lay all the burden on your parents. There comes an age where you no longer blame your parents for steering you in the wrong direction. You no longer blame your background for whom you have become. Because when you are at the age of 27, like myself, you now become the background yourself. That means, even in our politics, leaders have to take control of the situation in this manner, Ayub. Number one, demonstrate to people like us who are watching, people like you, Ayub, demonstrate to us that you have the goodwill for the society to go on in a manner that is conducive, that is right. Are you getting my point?
Yep.
Exactly.
Well gotten.
If I may.
Yeah, briefly.
Yes. And I think what Ibrahim unfortunately is doing is what the political class does, which is to shift the blame to the citizenry and tells us that you're not raising your kids good, that you've lost the moral angle and all of these things. For goodness sake, my father does not distribute national resources. My father is not in charge of the police that kills and maims people. Those are what is causing the problem in this country. My father does not speak for and on behalf of government. So it is the political class that is the problem. It's our politics that is the problem. So to shift this blame to the citizenry, that you're not raising your kids well enough, we've lost the morals, is to shift the blame, and that is what the political class does. The problem is at the politics. Distribute the resources equally, govern well, let the police uphold the rule of law, be transparent, those who hold offices, integrity, do not steal our taxes. Those are the problems. For goodness sake, it is not at the family level, or at least at the society.
And I have a simple
The problem we are talking about here, Mohammed, the problem we are discussing here is not just with the political class. Do you know, for example, in NTSA today, you cannot acquire a driving license without kuchota kitu kidogo? Is that still the political class?
Yes, it is, because the incompetence that is NTS cannot be blamed on me.
No.
The problem, what the citizen is thinking is that he's seeking the service. The service is not coming when he waits for it. For purposes of his convenience, he's forced
let me interject.
But okay.
In every sector in this country.
Yes, Ibrahim.
Just in politics.
Okay, briefly, yes, Wanjohi.
Allow me to ask the question, who elects the leaders that we have today?
Precisely.
I believe the leaders that we have today representing us at the ward level, in parliament, in Senate, and at the presidency are a representation of who we are as a people. He said that the people who are good, who have who are of moral, who are morally upright, are quiet, but they're not quiet. Every single day you go to vote, you have a ballot paper with people you can vote for, but we choose to vote for the worst kind of candidates ever. And I'll give you a good example. Boniface Mwangi. You know, I see people writing to him on Twitter all the time, telling him, "You're our only hope. Please help me talk about this issue that I'm facing." But he lied. And people did not vote for him because he did not play politics as Kenyans would want them to play politics. I am a young person. 2021, IEBC was looking to register 6 million unregistered voters. Do you know how powerful that is? Anytime I think about it, I get goosebumps, because these are people who would have formed their own government. They would have influenced the people they wanted to lead them as a country. We have student leaders in this country, in our universities, in our colleges. In the 90s, we had student leaders who would stand up against the Moi regime.
Okay.
Do we have that today? So, I mean, we are squarely responsible for the crisis that we are experiencing as a country, because we have refused, and especially we the young people. 75% of the people in Kenya are below 35 years.
So the society can't run away from the blames that we are facing.
cannot.
Yes, please, Mudalo, I'll come to you.
I think firstly, I wanted to just correct my brother, and I think my sister has really done it, and tell him that his father is part of the voting in this country and is part of the problem, because all of us and every leader who is in office is courtesy of the people. But again, just not to still feel like not to paint the country again, the kettle as black as we want it to sound. Remember, countries are work in progress. We cannot begin and get it right from the onset. There is always work in progress. Yes, we might not be where we want to be, but we are definitely not where we were. We are in a country today where a president supported a candidate who did not win election, and that President Uhuru Kenyatta handed over power to the person who won election. That is a step in the right direction. That's why many people still wonder up to today how that was able to happen. We're in a country today where former President Uhuru Kenyatta was able to lead the BBI process, and when the courts gave it a halt, he did not force it onto the people. That is a step in the right direction. So we are not where we want to be, but let us accept that we are able to. We have had those steps in the right direction. Myself and other young people were given opportunity at the helm of the country and the party by President Uhuru Kenyatta, who made it, for the very first time, the young people of this country started knowing that you can actually sit on boards. My sister Angel Mbuthia here sat on the board of the National Youth Council, and I'm sure she still does, because of President Uhuru Kenyatta, who trusted the young people and started giving them opportunities. So it might not be where we want to be, but let us also not make the country believe that the country is very dark. We are a democratic country today, and we are better than very many countries in Africa. So, but part of the problem is that when the IEBC said we are registering 6 million more Kenyans to vote, did we come out to register? Because we cannot fail to come out to register as voters and then start blaming governments. We must be able to be part and parcel of the process, because most of the time, and this squarely lies on us, the young people, because most of the time we want to excite ourselves with these narratives of we are the majority. But we are the majority where? Because we must be the majority where it matters most. We can be the majority in the streets, but if we are not having our voters' cards, that majority, it doesn't help. So we must be the majority where it matters the most. How are we advancing our conversations? When we are able to go on our social media platforms as young people, we are saying we are the majority. What narrative are we advancing? Okay. Are we advancing positivity, or are we advancing the other side? So in as much as we want to really make ourselves know that we are the leaders of tomorrow, this country, we are the majority in this country, we deserve the best in this country, we must be able to understand that as young people, we must play our role right. We have many, my brothers here have vied. We had Isaac, my brother here who ran for governor. And in those places they ran for, the majority were still young people. Okay. Who did they give the opportunity?
And that's the question. I mean, Isaac, which again speaks to the societal aspect here, because whatever discussion we are having, the source, the emanation point, it's the people. It's as a result of the family units we all hail from that form this country called Kenya. I mean, you can't detach the society and the community from whatever is happening at the top. I mean, the growing of the communities into materialism, and you have seen how the conditions are strict in contemporary Kenya. For example, when a wedding is happening in the context of our Kenyan societies, how people have turned out to be material, and the role the church and the mosques and the religious leaders largely are playing in seeking to course correct these measures, Isaac. Then what happens? I mean, you've talked about the governance question. Talk to me then about the last two aspects here of the family unit at the household level and religious leaders when they are stepping into the arena and address some of these inefficiencies, which Advice Mundalo might not say is to a large proportion, but even though on a minutiae, it still affects the running of the day-to-day affairs of the society.
Very true. I think everything rises and falls on leadership. And leadership starts from the family unit, as you've rightly put it. And we know that, the life that we are living in and the generation that we are in, we are facing a lot of family challenges. The family unit is at risk. And when you look at the statistics, they are worrying when we come to the aspect of the family unit. And this is, I think, where the challenges are coming in. Because an all-rounded person is well brought up from a strong basis of the family. But when the family is challenged, maybe by, family squabbles, separation, divorce rates are high, we are having an element of a dysfunctional family across the globe, not only Kenya. And you see, these are some of the challenges that, are coming in when we are saying, how is the leadership from the family unit being progressed? And that's why I said, when when our fathers pass the baton to us, do we have the capacity to step in those shoes? And as we lead our families right now, are we confident enough that when that time comes and we are supposed to hand over the batons to our children, will we be passing on something that is strong, something that will outlive us, or something that is already dysfunctional? And that is where the big question comes in. And that's why we are saying, initially the family unit was tied to the church. The church was a strength and the angle of fellowship, the angle of, using the pulpit to talk of values, to talk of family values, to encourage marriages, to question how we are raising our children. And that's why my sister here put it very well and said, you will be disciplined by any person you meet on the road because the child belonged to whom? To the village. Mm-hmm. And in any case, they wouldn't say that one is so-and-so's child. They will question you by the village that you come from. But you see, all those things we have, as the time has gone by, the effect of technology, living in a world whereby right now we are living in a global village, a small child will know what is going on morally. You see, it has compromised how some of us were raised. So then it begs the question, how then do we go from here? That's why we are saying the challenges of the family unit right now need some radical steps. And radical steps means, what is the moral of parenting? Okay. We've had issues in marriages. We've had, people who have lost lives in their marriages. It's unfortunate. Such a family cannot grow and raise a strong person. But then we are calling upon and saying, the responsibility of parenting now rises on our generation. And that's why I felt maybe Muhammad went in too fast to comment on our earlier conversation without really appreciating our conversation by saying there is a remnant. And that is the discussion we are having here today.
Okay.
There is a remnant when it comes to those of us in families, those of us who are raising our children in such a time when social media is like something else. It is us, yeah? You know, who need to speak to our children and raise out. You see, this culture of entitlement. Actually, yesterday I was having I happened to get this opportunity of, you know, for me to be able to mentor my children. I take them to school every morning and we have a discussion. You know, something that I can live and say as I head out to my business, I've planted a seed in my children. And yesterday we were talking about the spirit of entitlement, which is consuming our generation in a huge way. But then we are not ready to inculcate the aspect of responsibility and character development and character in these children.
Okay.
And that is the basis. And that's why when we are talking about the past leaders, Mohammed, we are not consumed by the past. We are looking at the past and saying, who inspired us?
All right.
We are looking at the past saying, which leaders stood in the gap for our country at that particular point when maybe they will have they will have gone on the materialism side of it and make a fortune out of it, and when the leaders that stood in the gap in that time inspired us.
Thank you.
And that's why we are saying when the materialism is creeping in from family unit to the pulpit of the church, whereby we cannot adequately, you know, preach the gospel and talk even of key things like, you know, the element of sexuality that is consuming the country. But then we can easily push a prosperity message that, you know, can capture people's mind and emotion and feel I can be reached by, you know, giving. Yet we are not answering to the call of humanity. Yet we are not speaking to the soul of humanity. And as they say, a society that continues to produce soft-minded people.
All right.
This is spiritual death on installment basis.
Thank you.
And that's where we are.
Yes, Angel, let me take your account and then I'll come to you.
I strongly appreciate the role the church has played in our society, from building schools to even establishing hospitals. But then I think the church should come back again to Kenyans and apologize, because the direction in which they steered us during the 2022 elections is not what really they spoke about in every other Sunday last year. So when we look at the church and what it's doing to the current generation, because now I'm seeing Gen Zs wearing T-shirts written, "We have left the church but not God." So when you see such movements springing up in a generation that really has not been embedded in the church space, because most of us millennials, we've at least been taken to church every other Sunday. But nowadays, because there's online church, you can choose to watch church at home or go to church physically. So we are losing out on a huge generation when we steer the country through the church in the wrong direction. Secondly, what I'd like to extrapolate on what Shohei was talking about to do with students. Universities have stopped becoming that place where young people can strongly express themselves. Largely, that is contributed to the political class, which has been continuously letting us down, because the students' movements was gagged by the draconian bill by Duale of 2016, the University Amendment Bill, that stopped students from electing their own presidents. Now students have to have sort of an electoral college system where someone else gets to elect a president for them. That has really demotivated and demoralized the students' movement.
Okay.
I have been birthed from student activism. I have been a vice chair in the Students' Organization of Nairobi University. I am here largely because of the role I played, and I continue to play in the student community. So when we see students not even being able to talk about the draconian education model, the education financing model, is something that we need to really call to attention. We need to revisit that bill made by Duale in 2016 and move on from that, because a lot of the things we are seeing young people are fighting are more of legislation. Advice here talks about I serving in the National Youth Council, and one of the things that are a big challenge is the quest of having a council which requires an election. But Parliament just won't pass the bill that will allow the National Youth Council to have its election. The National Youth Council was set up and was passed by Parliament in 2007, and the rules and regulations guiding the National Youth Council were based on the former structure of the country before the counties. So now a different bill needs to be passed so that it can allow for young people to elect their their leaders. But Parliament is sitting on that bill.
Okay.
We are not able to allocate resources for that election. And you wonder, what kind of conversation are we having with our young people? We are talking big on top of cars, but when it comes to the actual work, nothing is being done.
All right, and I'll come to yes, Wenju, I'll come to you, Mom. Yes.
I think I vied last year in Nyeri County for the woman representative seat. And I think we need to be worried about the family unit. There is a crisis among the young people, especially of drugs and substance abuse. Suicide is very high. And one of my agendas in my manifesto was a family unit. We grew up in homesteads where we had our grandparents, our aunties, our uncles, and our parents. So if I don't feel like talking to my parents, if I'm not close to them, I would go to my auntie or my uncle and talk to them. If my family is not a conducive environment, I would move to my neighbor and talk to my neighbor who is close to me. But that is lacking in today's society. And I feel there is need, and I think I've seen the first lady and the second lady having a component of the family unit as well as a boy child, but there is need for us to focus on the family unit. It doesn't have to be in a marriage setting, because we also have single parent households. And even then, we had father figures, if it's a mother, for instance, and if it's just a father, then we had mother figures within the family. But now that is lacking, and we don't even have safe spaces where young people can express themselves. That also translates to the political aspect. Having vied last year, I know the role that I come from Nyeri, and yes, it's a patriarchal society, but the women are very influential on who is voted for. If you have children living in Nairobi, when they go home, they ask their mother, who are we voting for in the next election? Yeah. So the family unit is also very important. And I would want to add that we lack civic education. The reason as to why many young people are not actively involved in our political system is probably because they don't understand that my showing up, my voting, who I vote for, is responsible for the decisions that will be made for the next 5 years, is because I don't know. So civic education, and it is enshrined in our constitution, it is a right for every Kenyan to have civic education. We have a budget allocation for it. IEBC exists to ensure that we have civic education. That is also lacking in our system.
Thank you. Yes, Mohammed had a point. I'll come to you.
So there's a lot of urbanization. Wealth is growing. So this idea that we'll go back to that communal setting where we live in the extended family is a far-fetched one. It is not going to happen. A lot of us are moving to urban settings. It'll be single families. That is the reality, fortunately or unfortunately. Secondly, if I may ask, when do you think was this golden age of parenting in this country where the child was the community's child? Could you give me some years, please?
Where I come from, it's still existing even now.
Plus Ayub, urbanization does not stop communities from existing. Communities are a group of people.
Even flats.
So just because we came to Nairobi doesn't mean we stop being a community. When we are seated here today, we are young people, we are a community. How we move on from here is a community decision. So just because people have moved from rural areas, I think you must debunk the misunderstanding, my brother, to mean community means village. Community means, and even village is still even in the urban setup. I think he thinks community means some people out of Nairobi. That is what community means. Community is just basically groups of setups. And I wanted to ask the question, when we talk about the church, don't you think it's time as a country to ask ourselves, what and who is the church? Because we can't have
we'll come to the religious aspect
every time.
Okay, we'll come to the religious
representing
aspect.
the church, and that is the decision.
Okay, that's wholly a different role altogether, because they play a very crucial role. Let him finish up, and then I'll come to you, Ibrahim.
Yes, if I may finish. One, that is narrowing the conversation to say that I think that community exists in the village. It's very unfortunate that my brother thinks.
But you said it's urbanization. When you say urbanization, you simply mean, and you have told us yourself, that people have moved and come to Nairobi, and therefore communities do not exist. So when you say that is narrowing the conversation, you narrowed the conversation yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you would allow me, please.
Yeah, unless you say you want to correct that.
All right.
Yeah.
If you could allow me, and then you could jump in. So, of course, as we move and as we become, as wealth grows and as parents, traditionally, or at least in the past years, the mother or at least one parent stayed with the kids for a long time. Income disparity is growing. The economy is getting tighter. Both parents are leaving the house at 6, coming back at 6. The time we spend together as a family is reducing further and further. If the time we spend with our own parents is reducing further and further, what about the time we spend with this larger extended family? That is the narrative that I'm driving. But secondly, my brother thinks that we had a golden age of parenting where the child belonged to the community. So let's assume, he hasn't given me years, but let's assume that was in the 70s, 80s, and whatnot. And that the leaders, no, whatever the time is.
This is a youth conversation.
Whatever the time is, yes, no, but whatever the time is, whatever the time is, even if it is in the 90s, when probably we were born and whatnot. So I will go from the 70s, coming all the way to the 90s. So those probably who grew up in that time are in office today. It includes the president, it probably includes a majority of those. If they grew up in this golden age of parenting where the community corrected them, where are those values? We do not see in them. They are the most corrupt people. They are the people leading this country astray. They are the people leading this country horribly bad. But let's come closer. And they say, the time we grew up, the very people probably who are more or less our ages are in government today. The senator for Trans Nzoia,
Chesang.
Yes, Chesang, very young, the ICT committee sub-chair. What was he implicated in? Jalango, all of these people who are relatively young. Zahir Janda from Kisii, all of these young people. Babu Owino, just a student leader the other years. All of these are people who grew up around this golden age of parenting. If they do not hold those values, if those in politics do not hold those values, it is to say that it is nothing to say that we had this golden age of parenting and it is because parenting has failed and society has failed that we are to blame. I strongly think it is the way our politics is made, that the worst of us are sent to power and the worst of us lead us. That is just how our politics are made. Is it wrong? Of course it's wrong. Do I disagree with it? Of course I do. But is it the reality? Of course, yes.
Yes, Ibrahim. I'll come to you, Wabuge and Wanjohi and Mondal, yes.
Ayub, allow me to talk to my good friend Mohammed, because he wants to demonize politicians, and I will not allow that because I am one of them. Mohammed, I have a friend. His name is Benson. Benson is a teacher in Nakuru. I know he's watching us. So Benson tells me that today you cannot practice corporal punishment on any student. You cannot do that. Because if you attempt to do that, their parents will come the following day and you would risk your job. Now, when we were growing up, not in the 1960s, as you are saying, just the other day, I am 27 years old, and I believe that is the time you are also growing up. Now, when we were playing football somewhere in the field, and a teacher or an adult passes nearby, we would stop until they pass.
There is a term that they use called heshima.
Heshima, exactly. What happens today, Mohammed? What happens?
The teacher stops.
The teacher has to stop until they are through with their football. You understand? Now, that is what I am saying, Ayub. It is not just about politicians. It is about you, Mohammed. What are you doing? Now, that is the state we are in. We are not talking about a certain golden age of parenting. We are talking about today.
Yeah, but you are discrediting today's parenting, or at least how today's families are set up, based on that the past was better and that we should go back to the past, right? Isn't that what you're trying to say? That today's, maybe we've gone wrong and that what we had in the past, even if it is in the time when you're growing up, that was better.
Mohammed, we come from...
You see, Mohammed, I know we cannot ask our members of parliament to legislate on our
moral values,
our behaviors, but some of these decisions that they are making sometimes will cost us in the near future, because these same students who are growing up will be adults tomorrow.
Yeah.
What do you expect? Mohammed, they will be worse even than the children we are raising today.
Okay, in an era, yes, Wanjohi, as you come in, and that tie Mohammed and Ibrahim's fundamental disagreements, which is welcome because it's a debate, to an era where it's a digital world. You have no control over what your kids access at home. Many learning institutions are now using the digital platforms. I mean, it's very obvious, it's factual that Facebook or Instagram have more attractive features than what a history class will otherwise portend for that kid to access. You have no control over what they're accessing at home, the gadgets, the websites they visit. I mean, tie that conversation up to the era that we are living in and the delinking of the parental role from what you are seeing at the moment of a disaster looming from youngsters who are growing in this generation, who apparently, interestingly, on the beautiful end, can speak their mother tongue. I mean, you will find his or she young, urbanized, tech-savvy from Rift Valley, from Coast, from Western, from Northeastern. They can't speak their mother tongue. They speak Sheng, they speak English and Swahili, can tilt the political landscape in this country if they can clearly stay off that. And talk to me about the role of parenting to that effect.
Thank you very much. And I want to agree with both Ibrahim and Mohammed and say Ibrahim is right in that we move from known to unknown. We cannot move from unknown to known. So what we know is what informs how we are going to navigate through what is unknown. And that is why history is extremely important. But we must also not run away from the fact that we are parenting in a very new world of digital world. But the government has a role. When the president was in the US, he met Google, he met Amazon, he met, I think, Facebook. And when you go to China and you look at the TikTok in China and what people see in TikTok in China, what is common or what most people see is hardworking Chinese kids. So government is able to demand that all these big telcos or these social companies also curate our content to show hardworking Kenyans, to show patriotism and stuff like that. But when you go to our TikTok today, especially at night, you want to run away. And I've seen that. I am personally not active on TikTok, but I have seen the discussions even in Parliament because of TikTok. So are we able to what are the discussions that the president and those who surround the president are having in these meetings when they have Facebook, when they meet TikTok? What discussions are they having? Because they're able to demand that the content is curated. Secondly, the role of community, we must not run away from it. Because a child, maybe you're in a matatu, for instance, and you see a child watching pornographic material. And this is a child. What do? Do you ignore and allow the child to continue watching that?
And you question how he was, either way, how he was molded at home.
No, but at this point...
I mean, how did he come to that point then? Isn't it, Isaac, a question that we need to ask ourselves? Yeah. When Wanjohi, you point out, for example, Ayub Jr. accessing such a material, and then, first of all, of course, you will feel it's your responsibility to make sure that you guide him to the right course, which is fundamentally very important. But won't you also ask yourself deeply, I mean, who is parenting him or her?
Let me finish.
Let her finish up.
Allow me to say, and I think I've seen Safaricom doing this, creating spaces where mothers can carry their children to work. I think we need to get to that point, and government really has to support by creating incentives, and one of those incentives has to be tax incentives for we who run businesses to be able to also accommodate mothers to come with their children to work, to allow them to spend some time bonding with these children. Because when you leave work at 6 a.m. and you leave the child, say, with the house help, who is not invested in the child, then what happens? And maybe that is what even, and I'm not blaming the house helps in any way, but maybe that's what the house help is watching. And this child will be watching what the house help is watching. So we have no way of controlling. But we need to allow our mothers, our fathers as well, to come with their children to work. We need to allow working from home from some days to allow for, and COVID has proven to us that we can do this, to allow parents to spend time together. But we also need to have the communal aspect, whether you live in a flat, whether you live in a standalone house, allow for parents to work together. And we have flats that work very well. We have neighborhoods that work very well, that are very, very intentional in terms of coming together and raising their children together.
Okay.
Because if I'm working from home today, I will be able to look at his children and see what are they doing. I also knock on the door and see, have you eaten lunch? Are you doing well? Because we need that. That's the only way we are going to move. I cannot move alone as an individual. Even when it comes to creation of wealth, our parents have investment groups, and that's how they've been able to invest. Unless we come together, we have a saying in my mother's tongue that says, you know, when we come together, we'll be able to lift the pot together, or the thing that people pound maize with, you know? So I think we still have to emphasize the role of community, even in the urban space.
Okay, okay. It comes to trust aspect again. In an era where even Nyumba Kumi initiative somewhat failed to work, as Wanjohi points out, it's very hard for many Nairobians, a majority, to know about who is their next door neighbor. You realize someone died in a one-bedroom house, two-bed, alone. his body is recovered days later, probably because of the smell or the stench that comes out of the house. Second is the trust question. I mean, when our parents came together, they pulled resources together without a third party or a lawyer, and that money would function to the extent that the community entirely was empowered. But today, you can't do that without a third party and coming in to ensure that what you agreed upon should be implemented when it comes to money or property. These two very conflicting aspects, Wabuge, how can we reconcile?
Yeah, I think parenting in our generation is the darkest smudge on our conscience. As parents in this generation, or those of us who are going to be parents in this generation, is the blackest smudge on our conscience. And why do I say this? The reality is that we are living in a dispensation whereby, averagely right now, people are dying on their second to their third marriages. This one is talking about a family breakdown to some sort. And for us to institute parenting back, for us to come back, is that our generation has unfortunately outsourced parenting to teachers and house helps at home. There is no mother-child engagement nowadays. There is no father-child engagement as it used to be. Nowadays it is hard sitting around a fireplace for our mothers to speak to our children, you see. And it's also because of a lot of things. Divorce rates are high in Kenya, separation rates are high in Kenya, but it calls upon now us going back to the basics to realize that even if I'm on my third marriage, how am I in my child's life? We need to reconcile the differences that caused marriages to break, to be separated from parenting. Let men come back home. Let men take responsibility of their children. Let men who are hiding children now there come out. I come from a society whereby our burials are the most interesting. Our burials are advice and I. How interesting they are. As we are sat there in our nuclear, we'll see other people in white and black as well. This is it.
I know in most cases take after their father.
And you see, by that time, when I look back, I realize that, some of these our fathers had the backbone because they were actually still in those lives. So I think this generation, we need to have a serious discourse and say, yes, even though marriages may not be working, let men take responsibility for their children. Before you get married to this man, these single ladies, have a sober discussion. Do you have any other out there? So that you allow this man to be his children's father. So that when you come with him in the house, you don't lock him for those who are whom you are raising. And then others out here are messing up. Our fathers did it successfully. Why not us? So what I'm trying to say is that with this generation that we are in, our challenges are unique. We have talked about the impact of social media. The other day I was taking my child to school. A 6-year-old girl sees, these balloons for, I think it's supposed to have been a reggae. And she recognizes the colors and said, the alphabet guys come here. And I'm like, who are the alphabet people? And say, Dad, don't you remember at Qatar World Cup? So there are stories about alphabet. This is a 7-year-old who has interacted with social media, knows what is happening. If I don't create time to have a conversation with such a child, how will it go? And if I told my disagreement with a child, with a mother who has a child with me, will block me from accessing my child, how will I play my father role?
Thank you.
So I think we are in a society whereby we need to change the aspect. Our sisters here, we need to change and say, if you know this man has other children, purpose to remind him.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that you see, all children are happy.
All right. Yes, Angel. I'll come to your advice. Yes, Angel. Because we have 5 minutes. We need to do it. Okay. Yes,
I don't know why Isaac says we need to change the values and the systems of our society. I think we need to embrace them as the time goes. It is important that our children are aware of the things that are happening. It's important that we know that we are in a 21st century where we are not just competing amongst Kenyans. We are competing competing with the rest of the world for very limited resources, and we need to upgrade our skills every now and then. But one thing that maybe I would support him on changing is this conversation that is very popular in Senate and Bunge and Parliament, is the conversation about period poverty. And one of the things that we are seeing out of that conversation is that men are not well involved in that conversation to ensure that our girls have access to sanitary towels. That is something that comes from the family system that needs to be entrenched, because we have so many young women across the country, young girls, who have no access to sanitary towels. But then when you have men coming into the conversation, you find that they know very little, because I know even you, Ayub, when I ask you 1, 2, 3 questions about sanitary towels, what they look like, how much they are, you may not know all that. But it's time we also invite men to this conversation on period poverty and sanitary and the accessibility of sanitary towels.
Thank you. Yes, advice. I'll come to you.
Okay, I think Ayub, to your defense, let me say at least you know the price of sanitary towels. Now what I'm talking about is the aspect of parenting. Most of the time we are reducing it now. We are speaking from both ends of the mouth when we say the community did a good job in the past, and when we talk about it in the present, we look at what is biological. Because community at that time, it necessarily did not mean our biological parents were the best parents. Sometimes it was about the teachers, it was about the people we met on the streets, it was about the other people. But when we are discussing this now about going forward, we seem to be shaping the narrative that the best person to take care of the child is actually the biological parent. And in our era today, I have actually seen children who are getting themselves in the wrong spaces because of a wrong parent. Because we also have situations where the parents are the ones who are actually misleading the kids. Mm-hmm. We are having a situation where the parents of this generation are actually competing in what would be misleading to the kids. You look at parents who want children not to grow up the way they grew up. Okay. We are looking at parents who feel like the way we grew up was actually a wrong way. So children today are competing more about what is your accent. The parent is more interested in the accent of the kid than in the reality of the things that the kid is growing up about. So when you talk about the community aspect of growing up and the community aspect of raising these children, we must be wholesome in it. So it is not like the child growing up with the house help is wrong. What the house help knows is the issue. Not that the child growing up with the aunt is wrong. What the aunt knows and the values the aunt is raising them, that is the issue. Actually, we have children who are better off with house helps than with their parents. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's now sample the feedback because Kenyans have also been sending their views on the hashtag on X Daybreak, the SMS code 22422. Here is what you are saying. And this one coming from Sir Nixon Dugure: transferring non-performers, especially in the public service, is simply transferring problems. The best option is to remove them completely on the line and investigate their plight offside. If they recover, well and good. This is in relation to the first topic we had of the reshuffle. Next is MC_rumors. President Ruto was complaining about incompetence of his cabinet secretaries instead of firing them. He moves them to other ministries. I don't think Ruto is competent to run government. This Kenya Kwanza government is a big joke, this according to him. Charlo Woodboy Rossi says, no moral values left in our youths anymore. This is as a result of what's happening in our country and the world at this point in time. Rotten. These leaders our youths are looking up to are not sincere in their actions and their behaviors are wanting. Ole Shonko says it's our hope that the cabinet reshuffle will impact the performance of cabinet secretaries. However, there is still a feeling from Wanjiku that very little have been achieved for the past 1 year, especially to improve the economy. Engineer Lazaro says Mudavadi's position as Super CS with additional powerful docket might trigger conflict of interest with the Deputy President line of duties. 2 centers of power will weaken the Deputy President executive powers. Okelo Mwalimu, it's unfortunate that the same politicians who have greatly contributed towards erosion of morality are regrouping to purport to provide solutions. They insult, fight, abuse each other in funerals, homecomings and churches in front of our children. This is totally unacceptable. And that's Godebara Sawere says the young generation has been dragged through ugly faces a lot. Reason being that they are a constituent that's so easy to manipulate, use and discard. Parliament should develop a policy that will safeguard them from such exploitation. This is unnamed, says even though it's true that youths haven't taken their civic responsibility seriously, we can't entirely blame them. Who would take elections seriously in a country where commissioners of polls body can't agree on election results?
And that is the last one that we had here on the broadcast. Many thanks for your feedback here on the broadcast Daybreak. And ladies and gentlemen, of course, the conversation continues, but because of time, we have to leave it at that. Ibrahim Karanja, gubernatorial candidate Nakuru, the last election in 2022. Thank you for your time, as well as the youth leader in Nakuru County. Isaac Wabuge is governance and policy commentator. Mundalo Advice is the national youth chairperson of the Jubilee Party. Angel Mbudia is the Youth League chair of the Jubilee Party. Two different factions, of course, because of the current state of politics in the Jubilee Party. Wanjohi Njoroge is climate change and nature consultant, contested for the women MP position in Nyeri County last elections. Thanks for your time. And Mohammed Abdullah is a law student and an active citizen. And your time is all appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. We'll do it this again and again. Thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X has been Daybreak. The SMS code 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We'll see you next week on Wednesday at the same time here on the broadcast on Daybreak. Till then, good morning.